What if I told you that 200 years ago, Americans couldn't sleep? They just couldn't sleep. Well, sleep is one of the great mysteries of life. Scientists still don't know exactly what it is or why we need it. But for a long time, sleep was seen as a kind of death, a quiet social story that we tell ourselves every night. For centuries, the only way to keep safe was to sleep with your eyes open, which meant that night was never truly dark.
Out.
There were no streetlights or indoor plumbing, and so people would stay up late, drinking, gambling, and fighting. But then something strange happened. A new invention called the alarm clock allowed people to sleep in. First, it was expensive, and only the rich could afford it. But as the years went by, more and more people began to use these machines to control their sleep. This is a story about power, technology, and resistance, and it all happened right here in America. Now stay tuned to learn more. Today's big question: why did everyone sleep so much in the early republic? It is July 27th, 1826, and the nation is in mourning. Earlier this morning, its founding father and beloved President Thomas Jefferson died in his home at Monticello. The cause of death: complications from uremia, a condition that arises when one has spent too much time in the hot sun. This was not unusual for Jefferson. Contemporary once described him as being in the habit of sitting for hours together in the sunshine. In fact, just 2 months earlier, he had written to a friend about how pleasant it was to sit outdoors and contemplate nature. Nothing he wrote can be so delightful as the reciprocal action of our senses and the exercise which we take while sitting in the open air and contemplating the order, the variety and the harmony of all that we see or hear around us. In a letter to another friend, he explained why he loved the outdoors so much. He complained about the indoors, writing, "I can find no words to express my weariness of all the confinement within doors." Oh, that man could only be born and die in the open air. For Jefferson, going outside was a form of therapy, a way to clear his mind and feel rejuvenated. But there was also a physiological component to his love of the sun. Sunshine made him sleepy. After a day of working in his fields or riding his horse around the grounds of Monticello, Jefferson would return home and go straight to bed. His biographer and close friend William S. McHenry wrote that he slept well, usually 6 hours, sometimes more. Another contemporary noted that in the evenings, Mr. Jefferson is generally in bed by 9:30 and seldom reads after tea, spending the intervals in walking, smoking, and sleeping. Even his daughter said that her father slept an extraordinary amount, which was surprising given that he was usually up before sunrise. On most days, Jefferson rose at 4 or 5 a.m. and immediately set to work. After a morning of intense labor, he would rest briefly in the late morning before working again in the afternoon. Jefferson was not alone. Across the United States, people were sleeping far more than we do today. In the 1830 census, the average American slept 9.5 hours a night, about 2.5 hours more than the average American today, and these are just averages. Some Americans were sleeping over 10 hours a night. How could this be? What led these Americans to spend so much of their lives asleep? To answer this question, let's jump back to the year 1826 and follow one man through an average day. Our subject is James Gadsden, a 37-year-old merchant living in Charleston, South Carolina. When James wakes up, it's before sunrise. He rises and dresses, then joins his wife and 4 children for breakfast. As a wealthy merchant, he does not have to work on the weekends, so he spends his mornings attending to his house and garden. After a few hours of leisure, he begins to feel tired, so he retires to his bedroom for a nap. James will probably sleep for a couple of hours, after which he will join his friends for lunch. After eating, James feels lethargic and takes another nap. In the afternoon, he meets with other merchants to discuss business deals and complete transactions. Back in the 1820s, credit was not widely used, and so merchants often carried cash in their person. James is careful to bring enough money to cover his expenses. With his business conducted, he returns home and has dinner with his family. Afterward, James spends time with his children, but soon grows weary and goes to bed. James will sleep until the next morning, at which point he will get up and do it all again. James's life is not unique. Most men in the early republic followed a similar routine, which centered around frequent naps. These naps were taken in the middle of the day and lasted between 30 minutes and 2 hours. Why did they nap so much? The obvious explanation is that these men were lazy, and that may be true. But there are other explanations as well. One such explanation is that these men suffered from chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue can be caused by poor diet, overwork, and even malaria, which was widespread in the early republic. Malaria causes fever, chills, sweating, and extreme exhaustion, symptoms that are consistent with chronic fatigue. It's possible that many Americans suffered from malaria, and that this explains their excessive sleepiness. But there is little evidence to support this hypothesis. Another possibility is that Americans in the early republic were simply better at sleeping than we are today. Today it's common for people to suffer from insomnia, but good sleep comes easily to few. In the early republic, however, people slept far more soundly. Travelers in America reported that the nights were filled with the sound of snoring. One Englishman who visited New York in 1824 wrote that it was impossible to pass through the streets without being annoyed by the heavy snores of those who slept in the public houses. Of course, some of these travelers were exaggerating for effect, but the general sentiment is clear. People in the early republic slept deeply, and they did so in large numbers. Given this, it's possible that the real explanation for napping in the early republic is that people were simply better at falling asleep than we are today. What's more, the culture in the early republic encouraged sleeping. In particular, it encouraged women to sleep a lot. Sleeping was seen as a feminine virtue. Her book, A Domesticated Republic, historian Rebecca Edwards argues that sleeping was a crucial part of how women demonstrated their femininity. Sleeping served as a marker of female modesty, which in turn validated the legitimacy of their sexuality and their value as wives. In other words, women who slept a lot were seen as more feminine, and this was a compliment. Men were also encouraged to sleep, if for different reasons. As Edwards writes, in the context of Republican ideology, sleep functioned as a metaphor for the nation itself, which was thought to enjoy a period of tranquility and plenty during the early Republic. In short, sleeping was a patriotic duty. But despite these cultural norms, some people did not sleep as much as others. Workers, for example, were too busy to take long naps during the day, and the same was true for single women who worked as teachers and servants. We know very little about how enslaved people managed their time, but it's likely that they also did not have time for long naps. Scholars believe that enslaved people were expected to work from sunrise to sunset with few, if any, breaks. This means that the bulk of Americans were not sleeping nearly as much as James Gadsden and Thomas Jefferson. That being said, even those who did not take naps still slept more than we do today. To see why, let's look at the invention of the electric light bulb. Till the invention of the light bulb, light came at a premium. When the sun went down, people went inside, and they stayed inside until the next morning. This meant that Americans slept in the dark for 12 hours a day, which promotes better sleep. Light, especially bright artificial light, disrupts our natural sleep patterns and makes it harder to fall asleep. Even today, scientists recommend turning off all of your lights when you go to bed. It's easy to see why. If humans evolved sleeping under the stars, then we should continue to sleep under the stars, or at least with as little light as possible. The invention of the light bulb changed all of this. After the 1880s, people could stay active long after the sun went down. They might meet friends at a saloon, see a play, or simply walk the streets. This left people exhausted the next day, and so they slept less. The invention of the light bulb, then, helps explain why modern Americans sleep so little. All told, Americans slept far more in the early Republic than they do today. Some slept because they were lazy, others slept because they had malaria. Still others slept because it was culturally expected of them. And finally, some slept because they didn't have anything better to do. In short, there is no single answer to this question. Instead, we must consider a combination of factors. In the end, though, it's hard to imagine that anyone would trade places with the early Americans, would unwant to live in a world where one could lie in the hammock for 2 hours in the middle of the day. Thank you for watching. A new factory built in the middle of a small village. Company relocates to an abandoned city and brings it back to life. A billionaire builds his own city from scratch. All of these examples have one thing in common, and that is industrial sleep. And that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to my channel. In recent years, there has been a growing interest in the idea of building entire cities from scratch. There are a number of reasons for this, but they all boil down to the fact that our current way of living is not sustainable. We are running out of resources, and our cities are becoming overcrowded. As a result, There's been a lot of talk about the possibility of building new cities in places like the desert or on other planets. But what if I told you that there was a place right here on Earth where we could build the cities of tomorrow? Enter industrial sleep. This is a type of development that has been around for decades, but it's only recently that people have started to take it seriously. The basic idea is to build factories in areas that are close to raw materials, but far from population centers. This allows companies to save on transportation costs, while still being able to produce goods quickly. And it's also great for the environment because it reduces the amount of fossil fuels that have to be burned. There are already many examples of successful industrial sleeps. For example, the city of Chongqing in China was once just a small village. But in the 1980s, the Chinese government decided to build a factory there to make motorcycles. The factory was a huge success, and soon Chongqing became one of the most important industrial cities in China. Or how about the city of Jamshedpur in India? This city was founded by the Tata Group in 1907, and it was originally meant to be a company town for the workers who were employed at their steel mill. Over the years, Jamshedpur has grown into a major industrial hub and it's home to over 1 million people. So what makes these industrial sleeps so successful? Well, there are a number of factors at play. For example, both Chongqing and Jamshedpur are located near two important sources of raw materials. Chongqing is close to coal mines and iron ore deposits, while Jamshedpur is located in the heart of India's mineral belt. This means that the factories in these cities do not have to pay high prices to transport raw materials, which keeps their costs down. Another important factor is the availability of cheap labor. In both cases, there are large populations of workers who are willing to work long hours for very little pay. This is especially true in developing countries where there is a high demand for jobs. Finally, both cities are located in areas that are politically stable and business-friendly. This makes it easy for companies to set up shop and start producing goods without having to worry about things like corruption or violence. There are many benefits to setting up an industrial sleep in an area that meets these criteria. For starters, the cost of production is very low, which means that businesses can make more profit. This can lead to more investment in the local economy and more jobs for people who live nearby. It also helps to reduce pollution since factories don't have to transport their goods long distances. By taking advantage of industrial sleep, companies can reduce their carbon footprint and help save the planet. Some experts believe that industrial sleep is the future of urban planning. They argue that instead of trying to cram everyone into big cities, we should spread out manufacturing facilities across the country. This would allow us to take advantage of local resources while still being close to population centers. Plus, it would create new economic opportunities in rural areas. Of course, there are also challenges associated with industrial sleep. For example, factories can sometimes be noisy and polluting, so it's important to choose locations carefully. Additionally, when a company leaves a sleepy area, it can be difficult to find another employer to take its place. This can lead to unemployment and economic hardship for the people who live there. Still, the potential benefits of industrial sleep are too great to ignore. I think that this is something worth considering as we try to create more sustainable and equitable cities for everyone. One company that has taken advantage of industrial sleep in a big way is Amazon. The retail giant has opened fulfillment centers all over the United States, each one located near a major population center. This allows them to quickly ship products to customers without having to rely on long-distance trucking. It also gives people who live nearby access to good-paying jobs. It's not just Amazon. Other companies are doing the same thing. For example, Walmart has opened distribution centers in areas like Memphis, Tennessee, and Atlanta, Georgia. These facilities allow the retailer to keep its shelves stocked with the latest merchandise, no matter what time of year it is. And they also create thousands of jobs in each community they're located in. In the past, companies like these would have built their fulfillment centers in places like Los Angeles or New York City. But those days are over. Companies are now realizing that there are other options available to them. They don't have to deal with the high cost of real estate, traffic congestion, or limited space when they can just head out to the suburbs instead. Many experts believe that this trend will continue in the years to come. More and more companies will look for cheaper alternatives to traditional urban locations, and they'll find it in industrial sleepers. As we've seen, there are plenty of benefits to setting up shop in an industrial sleeper. The cost of living is typically lower, the workforce is usually larger, and there's less competition from other businesses. It's no wonder then that some of the biggest names in the world are taking advantage of this trend. If you want to learn more about industrial sleep, there are a few key things to keep in mind. First, it's important to understand the different types of industrial sleep. There is rural industrial sleep, which is when factories are built in remote areas away from population centers. And there is urban industrial sleep, which is when factories are built in the suburbs or in smaller cities. Each type of industrial sleep has its own unique set of advantages and disadvantages. Second, it's important to consider the costs involved in setting up an industrial sleep. You need to take into account things like the cost of land, the cost of labor, and the cost of transporting your finished goods to market. If you can keep these costs low, then you'll be able to enjoy all of the benefits that industrial sleep has to offer. Finally, it's important to remember that industrial sleep is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one company may not work for another. You need to carefully consider your specific needs and circumstances before deciding whether or not industrial sleep is right for you. With that said, I think it's clear that industrial sleep is an important part of our economic future. As we look to create more sustainable and equitable cities, we need to take advantage of all the tools at our disposal. Industrial sleep is one of those tools, and it's one that we should embrace. What do you think? Do you think industrial sleep is the future of urban planning? Or do you think there are better solutions out there? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to learn more about industrial sleep, check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. You can download the entire catalog of human knowledge onto your phone, but you can't get more than 7 hours of sleep. You can fly halfway around the world in less than a day, but it takes 5 times longer to fall asleep than it does to get from New York to Tokyo. We are living in an age where instant noodles take longer to make than a full-course meal, where a 2-hour meeting has more agenda items than a 4-day vacation. We live in the fastest time of all time. But how much of that speed do we really benefit from? How much of that progress is actually benefiting us? And what is the cost of this so-called progress if it means spending more awake hours chasing it instead of sleeping? I'm here to talk about a topic that I feel very passionately about: sleep. As a doctor who specializes in sleep medicine, I see firsthand how badly we need to reframe our relationship with sleep. We tend to view sleep as something we have to catch up on, or something we do to rest before we go back to being productive. The truth is, sleep is not a cost of modern life. Sleep is a foundation on which we build our lives. And like any good foundation, the better it is, the higher quality our structure will be. And in our case, that structure is our health, happiness, and performance. We were recently reminded of this when the U.S. Surgeon General issued his first ever advisory on sleep, which recommends that adults get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. This was done because our health as a nation is suffering. According to the CDC, 1 in 3 Americans are not getting enough sleep, which puts them at increased risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, and even certain cancers. I want to talk about why we're sacrificing sleep and what we can do to change it. First, let's start with what we're sacrificing. Sleep is the most natural thing that we do, even though we spend 1/3 of our lives doing it. When we sleep, our brains clear out toxins that have built up during the day. Our bodies restore energy stores, repair damaged cells, strengthen our immune system, release growth hormone, improve memory, and increase creativity. Simply put, sleep helps us restore our minds and bodies for the next day. Now let's look at what we're sacrificing sleep for. A recent study found that one reason we sacrifice sleep is to work more. We are sacrificing our sleep for money, power, prestige, and security. Are these things worth it if it means sacrificing sleep? There are people who get ahead by sacrificing sleep, but eventually they hit a wall. Burnout looks different for everybody, but generally when people reach this point, they lose their effectiveness. Their productivity goes down and they lose interest in things that used to be important to them. They also become more susceptible to illness and injury. In other words, the very thing they were trying to achieve in the first place. So now the question becomes, is there a better way? Is there a way to get ahead without burning out? The answer is yes, but it requires a fundamental shift in the way we think about sleep. To illustrate this, I want to share a story with you. This is my hero, Thomas Edison. He was a brilliant inventor whose innovations changed the world. He invented the phonograph, the motion picture camera, the first commercially practical incandescent light bulb. But he wasn't just a genius inventor. He was also a genius businessman. He understood the value of branding and marketing. There's this famous story about him working around the clock to invent the light bulb. It's such an iconic image, the lone inventor working tirelessly until he invents the light bulb. But this story is almost entirely false. Edison didn't invent the light bulb. In fact, he improved upon many different versions that already existed. What he did invent was the entire concept of electrical power. He set up the first electrical power station and developed the first complete lighting system for the world. And he accomplished this in only 24 days after receiving a $2 million grant from JP Morgan. What this teaches us is that if you want to accomplish something great, sometimes the best way to do it is to step back and rethink the problem from a different angle, instead of thinking of sleep as a cost. What if we thought of sleep as an investment? What if we viewed every hour of sleep that we got as an investment in our health, happiness, and performance? Would we then be willing to treat sleep as a priority? That's exactly what I want my patients to do. I tell them to consider what it would be like if they had a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and a mental health counselor. All people whose job it was to help them live healthier, happier, and more effective lives. I asked them if they could afford this, would they invest in these things? Of course they would. Then I asked them, well, you can't afford it. Let me give you a sleep prescription. Now it's up to you to follow through on it. The concept of investing in sleep is really not that new. In fact, it goes back thousands of years. Back in ancient China, Lao Tzu said, watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. What he was saying is that everything starts with small choices. Your habits determine who you are. So if you want to have a different future, start by changing your habits today. And what are the habits that we should start with? Well, for me, I believe that starting with sleep is one of the best places to start. If we can get our sleep in order, we will find that our lives are in order. So here's my advice. First, get your sleep in order. Make sleep a priority. Think of every hour of sleep as an investment in your health, happiness, and performance. Second, cut out the bad habits that keep you up. These are things like drinking too much caffeine or alcohol late in the day, eating sugary foods, and staying up too late scrolling on your phone. Replace these bad habits with healthy ones like reading, taking a warm bath, journaling, or meditation. Third, don't sacrifice sleep to work more. Instead, use sleep to perform better at work. Finally, think about the kind of legacy that you want to leave behind. Do you want to be known as someone who always sacrificed sleep for work, never really fully present for the people they loved? Or do you want to be known as someone who valued sleep, who prioritized their health, and was there for the people they loved? For those of you watching, I challenge you to write down your thoughts on this in the comments below. Share this video with others and join the conversation about sleep. We are all in this together. Thank you. If I had to describe my hometown in one word, it would be ugly. And if I had to describe the dominant emotion that permeates the lives of the majority of people who live there, it would be hopeless. The buildings are ugly. The water is ugly. The sky is often covered by a brown haze. The air is filled with the sounds of sirens and shouting and the constant rumble of traffic. It's a city whose infrastructure was designed for 500,000 people, but has been home to over 2 million people for decades. And it shows. But what's most ugly of all is how the majority of people seem trapped, unable to make any meaningful changes to their lives or to the world around them. Trapped in bad relationships, dead-end jobs, dwindling communities, crime-ridden streets, unfixable cars, mountains of debt, dying industries, and the list goes on. It's not hard to see why so many young people leave as soon as they can, and why so few ever return. My hometown is a product of late capitalism. Its development was driven by the extraction of wealth from other places, which led to the building of ugly, low-quality housing projects, crumbling schools, underpaid and overworked teachers, insufficient hospitals, homeless shelters, and so on. It's a place where entire generations have been sacrificed to keep the capitalists, who own the means of production, happy. All this has resulted in widespread despair, alcoholism, drug addiction, out-of-wedlock pregnancies, lack of education, poverty, and an incredibly high mortality rate. This isn't just my hometown. It's actually every Rust Belt city, countless small towns across the American Midwest, and yes, even many parts of the global South. In fact, it's wherever capitalists have deemed certain groups of people expendable. What we have here is nothing less than a death sentence, which raises the question, why? Why do capitalists allow these situations to arise? What would it take for them to change it? And finally, can anything actually change? Well, to answer these questions, let's take a look at what's called the capitalist dream machine. I know that sounds stupid, but bear with me because this concept is going to help us understand a lot of things. You see, capitalists aren't just greedy, selfish monsters. They're also incredibly smart. Over the years, they've come up with very clever ways to get the average person to accept the necessity of exploitation. The way they do this is through the creation of dreams, aspirations that are just out of reach, that keep us running on the wheel like hamsters. Here are some examples. In the United States, the dream is typically homeownership. For most of our history, owning a house has been synonymous with being successful. It's something everyone should strive for because it represents stability and freedom. However, today, the average price of a home is higher than it's ever been before. Massive corporations have replaced mom-and-pop businesses. In many areas, housing is unaffordable without taking on a second job, working overtime, and eating cheap food for every meal. Despite this, homeownership is still promoted as the ultimate goal, something that will magically make life better. But let's be real, if your only motivation for getting a house is to say that you own a house, then you'll never be satisfied. You need something bigger, a nicer house, a house in a better school district. This is why homeownership has become little more than a status symbol. It has nothing to do with improving your quality of life or becoming free. Instead, you're simply trading one set of problems for another. And this is no accident. Another example is retirement. Retirement used to be about kicking back, taking it easy, and spending time with family after a lifetime of work. Today, retirement is advertised as a time when you can travel the world and try new things. The problem is that the only way this is possible is if you spend every waking moment that you not retired trying to save up enough money to afford it. So rather than being a reward for a lifetime of hard work, retirement is simply another form of deferred gratification, another carrot dangled in front of you to keep you working. The same thing can be said about luxuries like vacations, fancy dinners, designer clothing, status cars, and so on. They're made to be just out of reach, attainable only for those who sacrifice everything else in their lives. The point is that these dreams act as a form of social control, a way to trick people into accepting a miserable present in exchange for a better future. The problem is that the future never comes, or if it does, it's only for a lucky few. But why? Why are these dreams presented as universal goals when they're really only possible for a select few? Well, it all comes down to one thing: competition. Competition is the foundation of capitalism. Everything from wages to stock prices to property values to standards of living are compared in relation to everything else. This allows capitalists to continually squeeze more and more surplus, be value out of workers while distracting them with the promise of success. We know that success is rare because that's obvious. But what's not obvious is how that benefits the capitalists. You see, by promising success to some and delivering it to a lucky few, capitalists have invented a perfect system to ensure that their power goes completely unchecked. How simple. Just dangle the carrot in front of the masses and watch them fight each other to get it. Think about it. Who do you think benefits the most from widespread hopelessness and poverty? Obviously not the capitalists who live comfortable lives in gated communities, send their kids to private school and have access to the best healthcare and so on. No, the people who benefit the most are the politicians who represent the interests of the capitalists. When people are hopeless and don't believe that they can make meaningful changes to their lives, they don't vote. They don't join unions. They don't start political parties. They don't protest. They simply crawl into bed defeated, put on the TV, and forget about tomorrow. This is why the capitalist dream machine is always working in the background, keeping the masses distracted, making sure that they never realize how screwed they really are. Of course, this doesn't mean that absolutely nothing can change. Hope is not entirely lost. In fact, there are signs that things are starting to shift. There are dozens of examples of formerly red states turning blue. People in many areas are beginning to recognize the damage that decades of right-wing rule has done to their lives. But the window for changing this is quickly closing. Soon the right will be in power again and implement their plans to further restrict voting rights and entrench themselves in positions of power. If this happens, the situation will likely become irreversible. So the question remains, can anything actually change? Well, anything is possible, but it won't be easy. We live in an age when people would rather die than admit they were wrong. Take the COVID pandemic, for example. Millions of people died and continue to die because anti-vaxxers refused to get vaccinated. The war in Ukraine is worsening by the day because nationalists do and want to admit that their country's leaders are incompetent. People are going hungry in Sri Lanka because nationalists refuse to admit that their country's economy is a disaster, and so on. This stubbornness to admit fault is perhaps the greatest threat we face today. It prevents us from fixing mistakes and allows problems to snowball into crises. This is why changing the system seems almost impossible. It requires admitting that decades of choices made by both Republicans and Democrats have led us to the edge of a cliff. It requires admitting that both parties have failed us and that neither of them is capable of fixing the mess that they helped create. It means giving up on our attachment to the two-party system and building something new. Most of all, it requires admitting that despite what we might believe, we're not special, we're not exceptional, we're certainly not unique. The beliefs we hold are held by millions of others around the world. Our problems are their problems too, and our solutions will be their solutions as well. This is the only way forward. But until we admit that we're not exceptional, we're doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. If you're struggling to sleep, you're not alone. 7 out of 10 Americans report sleeping poorly, which is more than double the rate just a generation ago. And this epidemic of insomnia has only gotten worse during the pandemic. But why are we just getting worse at sleeping? Or are there outside factors that play? Well, it turns out that our increasingly digital world has had a profound effect on our ability to sleep. By understanding exactly what about technology interferes with sleep, we can take steps to fix it. In fact, there are 3 main ways that our relationship with technology disrupts our sleep. The first is the light emitted from these devices. The second is the cognitive stimulation. And third, the physical sensations from the devices themselves. Let's start with light. It turns out that one of the biggest reasons that modern life makes us worse at sleeping is that we are surrounded by light all the time. Just before bed, many of us will sit down and check our phones while scrolling through social media or catching up on emails. But this can dangerously reduce the amount of melatonin, a hormone that promotes good sleep. In fact, one study found that reading an ebook on an iPad reduces melatonin levels by 43% compared to reading a regular book. And the reason for this is simple. Like most electronics, iPads emit blue light, which suppresses melatonin production more so than other colors of light. In fact, one study found that exposure to blue light just 2 hours before bedtime delays the release of melatonin by 30 minutes. So if you're still catching up on work at 9:30, your body won't start producing melatonin until 10, making it harder to go to sleep. But the issue doesn't end there, because the way that we use light in our homes exacerbates this problem. For example, bright overhead lighting helps us stay alert and focused when we're awake. But if you have your overhead lights on right before bed, this can make your brain think that it's still daytime. In fact, one study found that bright white lights increase the amount of time it takes to fall asleep by 25%. What's more, having too much ambient light in your room can disrupt the quality of your sleep once you fall asleep. In fact, one study found that infants exposed to ambient light wake up an hour earlier than those in total darkness. And while you might not be an infant, studies suggest that adults are similarly affected, with one study finding that ambient light increases the number of awakenings after you fall asleep. So, to mitigate this effect, try dimming the lights an hour before bed, turning off overhead lights completely, and using blackout curtains to block any distracting light. The second problem is the cognitive stimulation. If you watch TV right before bed, UVA probably noticed how many commercials there are for things like Lasix to help you sleep, because it's a common practice that ironically is terrible for your sleep. See, our brains process emotions differently than other animals. We overthink everything. And nowhere is this more apparent than when we're trying to go to sleep. It turns out that thinking about problems like finances, work, or relationships activates the same region of the brain as physical pain. That's why it can be so hard to let go of your worries and drift off to dreamland. What's worse, watching TV often exacerbates this problem. For example, one study found that watching action-packed shows like Game of Thrones increases the amount of time it takes to fall asleep by 50%. This is likely due to two factors. First, emotionally charged scenes trigger our sympathetic nervous system, which causes physical reactions like increased heart rate and blood pressure, which makes you less sleepy. Second, these scenes also activate our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and problem-solving. And that SYU sometimes feels satisfied after a show, because you feel like you're resolving the problem alongside the characters on screen. But this activation comes at a cost, because it takes your brain a long time to dial down your prefrontal cortex, especially if the show keeps you on a cliffhanger. This means that you spend a lot of time awake simply thinking about the show instead of sleeping. And to make matters worse, the blue light from the screens suppresses melatonin production, making it even harder to fall asleep. Limit screen time an hour before bed, and pick relaxing shows rather than action-packed ones. And finally, we get to the third problem, the physical sensation from the devices themselves. We typically think of our smartphones as a tool, but they're really just fancy computers with a touchscreen. And this design forces you to interact with it in a unique way. See, when you're on your computer, you're typically holding it at an arm's length away from your body. But your phone is designed to be inches away from your face and constantly touching. This can be a problem because the act of touching your phone triggers your somatosensory system, which is the part of your nervous system that detects physical stimuli like temperature, pressure, and pain. When you're falling asleep, your somatosensory system is supposed to calm down, but holding your phone prevents this. One study found that playing a video game on your phone just 20 minutes before bed increases fingertip activity by 180%. All this movement can make it harder to fall asleep because your brain thinks that you need to be alert. And the issue only gets worse if you lie down to scroll through TikTok. When you're lying down, gravity pulls your arm towards your body, causing your fingertips to cramp up. Your brain interprets this cramping as a threat and once again increases your heart rate, making it even harder to fall asleep. And if you try to counteract this by holding your phone at a distance, you'll run into another problem. Holding your phone further away from your body means that you have to increase the brightness to see the screen, which, like we discussed earlier, also suppresses melatonin production. So to improve the quality of your sleep, try setting your phone down across the room and stick to reading a physical book before bed. So in short, the 3 ways that technology makes us worse at sleeping are 1. The blue light emitted from screens suppresses melatonin production and increases the time it takes to fall asleep. 2. Mentally engaging shows keep our prefrontal cortex active, preventing us from letting go of our worries and overthinking problems. And 3. Physically holding your phone increases fingertip activity and cramps up your fingers when you're lying down, which increases your heart rate and prevents you from falling asleep. But now that you know the cause of your insomnia, you might be wondering what you can do about it. Well, it turns out that there are simple lifestyle changes that can dramatically improve your sleep. In fact, one study found that seniors who made these changes improved their sleep quality by 50%. First, establish a consistent sleep schedule by going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. This trains your body to naturally fall asleep at your desired bedtime. Second, exercise more, preferably in the morning. Exercise improves the quality of your sleep, but doing it in the morning gives you more energy during the day and prevents you from being tired at night. Third, take a nap if you're exhausted. Most people think that naps disrupt your sleep schedule, but that's only true if you nap late in the afternoon. Napping early in the afternoon, on the other hand, actually improves the quality of your sleep. Fourth, expose yourself to sunlight during the day. Sunlight helps regulate your circadian rhythm, which is the internal process that tells you when it's nighttime or daytime. And lastly, avoid numbing techniques like alcohol before bed. Alcohol might make you feel relaxed, but it disrupts your sleep later in the night, causing you to wake up more frequently. And if you want to learn more about improving your health, check out this video. And if you want to support our mission of making science and tech stories, you can consider supporting us. I'd like to introduce you to the post-COVID sleep era, an era defined by 3 sleep trends. The first is that we are sleeping way less than we used to and way less than we need to. The second is that we're also experiencing more fragmented sleep. And the third one is that for those of us who have the privilege of being able to work from home, many of us are staying up late into the night, getting up early in the morning to accommodate our work schedules and squeezing our sleep into whatever time is left. So these three trends combine to really disrupt the circadian rhythm, or the internal clock that all of us have. So let's talk about why this is happening. What are the consequences of living in the post-COVID sleep era? What can we do to reset our biological clocks? Before we dive into the sleep trends, let's talk about what sleep actually does for us. While we're sleeping, our brains are doing a lot of important things, including memory consolidation. This means that while we're sleeping, we are transferring memories from short-term to long-term storage. That's why if you cram for a test and then you sleep on it, you're more likely to remember that information than if you pull an all-nighter and just try to review the material over and over again. Also, sleep helps us process emotions. If you've ever noticed that you wake up feeling refreshed after a nightmare, that's because while we're sleeping, we're processing those emotional experiences and integrating them into our long-term memories. Sleep also allows us to restore and repair tissues, build bone and muscle, grow hair, and fight off infections. In short, when we don't get enough sleep, we age faster and we're more susceptible to illness and disease. And unfortunately, not getting enough sleep is becoming the new normal for many of us. According to the CDC, Americans are sleeping 7 or fewer hours per night on average, which is less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours for adults. And kids and teens are doing even worse, with only about 8 hours for teens and 6 hours for preschoolers. But there's also another factor at play here, which is sleep fragmentation. So if you're like me, you might go to bed and wake up feeling pretty rested, but maybe around 4 a.m. you wake up for no apparent reason, and then you lie there for half an hour or longer unable to fall back asleep. And then you end up waking up again at 6 a.m. anyway, but now you're feeling kind of groggy. That's because we have changed the way that we sleep. We're sleeping later, we're waking up earlier, and we are now averaging 2 or more awakenings per person each night. For people who work from home, we are also seeing a trend of working later into the night and sleeping in later in the morning. This is creating some real problems for our internal clocks. So here's how it works. Our bodies have an internal clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, which is located in the hypothalamus, and it controls our circadian rhythms. It tells our bodies when it has time to be awake and alert and when it has time to sleep. The SCN synchronizes with the 24-hour day-night cycle of the Earth by using environmental cues such as light and temperature. So the SCN needs morning sunlight, or else it gets out of sync with the actual 24-hour day. And too much daylight too late in the day keeps our brains thinking it's daytime when it should be nighttime. Now, you may think, well, I work from home and I'm on my own schedule, so I should be fine. But it turns out that our SCNs don't function well without morning sunlight exposure, or else they start to drift, and then we lose our ability to sleep at night. And we need help from bright light exposure during the day and darkness at night to reset our internal clocks. So let us take a look at how our 3 major sleep trends are impacting our sleep quality and overall health. First of all, sleeping less than we used to and less than we need to. In 2016, the average American slept 8.8 hours per week less than we did in 1942, and this reduction in sleep has coincided with increases in obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Now, you might think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'll make up for it on the weekend, or I can catch up on my sleep on vacation, but it doesn't work that way. Our bodies need consistent sleep in order for that sleep to count. So if you have a big project due on Monday, you stay up till 3 a.m. working. Even if you sleep in until noon on Saturday, you're still going to feel exhausted on Monday. And too often, sleep is the first thing we sacrifice in order to meet our work and life demands. But that's actually counterproductive because when we don't sleep enough, it reduces our ability to focus and concentrate. It lowers our IQ by 10 points. It increases our stress hormone levels, cortisol and adrenaline, and it makes it harder to learn new things. Trend No. 2 is sleeping more lightly or having more fragmented sleep. That 4 a.m. awakening I mentioned earlier is a sign of lighter sleep, which is more easily disrupted by noise and other distractions. It's also harder to fall back asleep when we wake up during the night, especially if our rooms are too bright or too cold or too hot. And our sleep has become more fragmented because we're constantly connected to technology. Whether it's notifications from social media, messages from colleagues, emails, or news alerts, these distractions can wake us up during the night or prevent us from falling asleep in the first place. We're also more distracted by our thoughts at night, which is probably related to the fact that we have way more stuff to worry about today than we used to. So it's harder to quiet our minds at night. Sometimes we're just plain uncomfortable. Restless leg syndrome, allergies, and sleep apnea are just some of the factors that can fragment our sleep. And the third trend is sleeping later and waking up earlier to accommodate work-from-home schedules. When we wake up before sunrise, we send signals to our brain that it's time to start the day. And this helps us get into a rhythm that promotes good sleep. Similarly, when we go to bed early, our body starts producing chemicals that promote sleep. But when we stay up too late watching TV or using our phones, we trick our bodies into thinking it's still daytime. And the same thing happens when we wake up too late. We're missing that morning sunlight exposure, which sets our circadian rhythm for the day. We all know how hard it is to wake up early. But for those of us who work from home, it's extra difficult because there's no clear separation between work and personal time. And too often, we end up working late into the night because that's the only time we have. But that can wreak havoc on our sleep schedules. It's estimated that 1 in 3 adults are chronically sleep deprived. And the consequences of chronic sleep deprivation are dire, including increased risk of stroke, heart attack, dementia, and depression. Now, you might think none of this applies to you because you do struggle with insomnia or sleep apnea. But even small disruptions in sleep can add up over time and cause big problems down the road. So what can we do to reset our biological clocks? The first thing is to get morning sunlight exposure. This is the most effective way to reset our internal clocks. So open your curtains or go outside for a walk first thing in the morning. The second thing is to avoid caffeine after lunch. Caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours, and so if you drink some in the afternoon, it will still be in your system, keeping you up by the time you want to go to bed. Third, establish a regular sleep schedule. Go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even on weekends. And fourth, turn off all screens at night. The blue light emitted from our screens suppresses melatonin production and prevents us from falling asleep. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you found it helpful, please share it with others. And let me know in the comments below if you have any other tips for resetting our biological clocks. Thanks for watching. Sleep is one of the most important things we do in order to stay healthy. It's well known that not getting enough sleep will cause all sorts of problems. But what if we could use new technology to make sleep even better? In this video, I'm going to share some amazing new tech that already exists today that can make your sleep so much better. I'll be sharing a few different devices. Some are affordable and others are a little bit more pricey, but each one offers something unique to improve the quality of your rest. Also, since good sleep is essential to being at our best when we're awake, it's also going to help us be more productive, feel better physically and mentally, and just have an overall better life. Now let's talk about the future of sleep. I don't know about you, but I love my mattress. It's comfortable and I feel like I get a good night's sleep when I am on it. But there's one problem. My dog likes to cuddle with me in bed, and he likes to move around a lot. Now, it's not that I mind having my dog in bed with me, but I would prefer to have my own space while I'm sleeping. Also, I snore really loud, so I don't want to disturb my wife while I'm sleeping, so I have 2 separate twin beds. But if I were to have one king-size bed with my dog, I would definitely consider getting the 8 Sleep Smart mattress. It's a cutting-edge device that can control the temperature on both sides of the bed independently, which makes it perfect for couples who have different preferences. For example, I like it to be a bit cooler on my side of the bed, while my wife prefers it to be warmer on hers. The 8 Sleep Smart mattress uses advanced technology to pump water from a central unit into a network of tubes that are sewn into the cover of the mattress. This allows for precise temperature control on both sides, ensuring that you wake up feeling refreshed and comfortable. Plus, the mattress is also able to detect and respond to changes in body movement, meaning you and have to worry about your dog moving around and disrupting your sleep, or changing the temperature on your side of the bed. Now, I haven't tried this particular mattress yet, but I have used other 8 Sleep products and they're fantastic. The 8 Sleep Pod, for example, is a great option if you're not ready to commit to a whole mattress. It's a self-contained unit that fits on top of your existing bed and does the same thing as the Smart mattress. controlling the temperature of the bed on both sides. It's a great way to try out the benefits of the 8 Sleep technology before making the investment in a new mattress. The 8 Sleep products are a game changer for anyone looking to upgrade their sleep game. And they also a great option for those who want to keep their furry friends off the bed. With the ability to control the temperature on both sides and detect changes in body movement, you'll be able to get the perfect night's sleep no matter what. Next up, let's talk about the Sleep Number 360 P1. The first thing you'll notice about this bed is its futuristic look. It's a striking black color and has a sleek design that will definitely turn heads. But it's not just about looks. This bed is packed with features that make it a true game changer in the sleep world. One of the standout features of the Sleep Number 360 P1 is its built-in snore detection and response technology. If you're a snorer or you sleep with someone who snores, you know how disruptive and even dangerous it can be. But with this bed, you don't have to worry. The built-in sensors detect snoring and automatically adjust the bed's position to help reduce it. It's like having a personal snore coach right there in your bed. But the Sleep Number 360 P1 isn't just good for snorers. Anyone who wants to take their sleep game to the next level will appreciate the personalized comfort settings that allow you and your partner to set the perfect position and firmness on each side of the bed. You can adjust everything from the comfort of your phone or the keypad on the side of the bed. The bed also comes with a variety of pre-programmed settings to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up feeling refreshed. Another cool feature of the Sleep Number 360 P1 is the built-in alarm system. You can set the alarm to wake you up at a gradual incline, which is much gentler than a traditional alarm clock. The bed will gently vibrate and make a soft noise until you wake up, helping you start your day feeling more energized and less groggy. The Sleep Number 360 P1 is truly a game changer in the sleep world. Whether you're a snorer, someone who wants more personalized comfort settings, or just someone who wants to wake up feeling refreshed, this bed has you covered. Alright, now let's shift gears and talk about a sleep experience that's out of this world. Literally. If you've ever wanted to feel like an astronaut floating in zero gravity, then the Zero-G experience is for you. This innovative sleep system uses air pressure and water to create a weightless environment that will make you feel like you're refloating in space. Now, before we go any further, I need to say that this isn't going to actually make you feel like you're refloating in outer space. There's just no way to replicate the true zero-gravity environment on Earth. But what it will do is give you a feeling of reduced gravity, which can be equally relaxing and rejuvenating. It's like being on a cloud or a big marshmallow. So here's how it works. The system pumps air and water into an inflatable shell that surrounds your body, creating a sense of weightlessness, right? You can adjust the amount of air and water to find the perfect level of support and comfort. It's like being cradled by a giant, but without the awkwardness of having someone else touch you. The Zero-G experience is also great for people with back pain or other physical discomfort. The weightless environment can help alleviate pressure points and reduce pain and inflammation. Plus, the system also includes built-in massage and heat therapy features to further relax your muscles and improve your overall comfort. If you're looking for a truly unique and unforgettable sleep experience, then the Zero-G experience is definitely worth checking out. Just be prepared to spend some serious cash. This is not a budget-friendly option, but if you can afford it, why not treat yourself to a once-in-a-lifetime sleep experience? Lastly, let's discuss a company that specializes in making sleep a little more fun. Their products are colorful, playful, and highly effective in improving sleep quality. One of their most popular products is the Dreamlight alarm clock. This funky-looking device not only wakes you up with a gentle light, but also with your favorite song or nature sounds. You can set multiple alarms to make sure you wake up, even if you hit the snooze button. And the clock also has a built-in radio, so you can listen to your favorite station while you get ready in the morning. For those who want to track their sleep, the Bed It Sleep Monitor is a great option. This sleek-looking device looks like a fancy headband, but it's actually a high-tech sleep monitor that tracks your sleep stages and provides detailed analysis through a smartphone app. With this information, you can make adjustments to your sleep habits and environment to improve your sleep quality. And for the ultimate sleep experience, check out the Dreamscape sleep system. This system combines a comfortable air-filled cushion with a built-in heating and cooling system to regulate your body temperature throughout the night. You can also connect the system to the Dreamlight alarm clock to wake up with a gentle vibration instead of a jarring alarm sound. The Dreamscape sleep system also has built-in sensors that track your sleep patterns and provide feedback through the smartphone app. With so many innovative and playful products, it's no wonder why this company is leading the way in the sleep tech industry. They're making sleep more fun and accessible for everyone. And who knows, you might just learn a thing or two about your sleep habits along the way. Well, there you have it, folks. Some of the most exciting advancements in sleep technology that promise to make our nights more comfortable, more restful, and even a little bit fun. From smart mattresses that cater to your every need to weightless sleep experiences that simulate zero gravity, the future of sleep is looking bright. So why wait? Grade your sleep game today and get ready to feel like a new person tomorrow. Sleep isn't just a need, it's a right. It's a history. It's a quiet revolution. In 1963, President Kennedy signed the Executive Order 11,193, which established the first National Sleep Week. The order read, "All persons in the U.S. have a right to a minimum of 8 hours of sleep," but it's not that simple. In America, 40% of people don't get enough sleep. That's why our founder, Professor Jim Horn, created the sleep revolution. He wanted to help people understand the importance of sleep. He did this by building the world's largest sleep database, which includes sleep trackers, smartwatches, and brain monitoring devices. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, because more stories are coming. Stories that will hopefully change the world for the better. And maybe, just maybe, they'll even follow you into your dreams.